Ladies and gentlemen, here we are in our green room where I'm very pleased and honored to welcome one of the greatest American ballerina, Merrill Ashley, who, thanks God, is working now with the Bolshoi company as we are doing and transmitting directly Balanchine masterpiece, Jewels. Hello, Merrill. I am so pleased you could come and be here with us.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here.
And for us, really a honor to have you here. And I was wondering, when you first heard about Balanchine, when was it? How old you were?
I think when the first time that I really heard the name and remembered the name and knew that it had some meaning, directly, was when I was a student at the School of American Ballet. When I was 12.
When I look at your life, sometimes I think that your talent was moving you forward. Like you came with your sister, she supposed to dance, then they found out that you have talent, and this path was sort of built up for you in a sense.
Well, I had an interest. I saw my older sister take a ballet class, and that sparked my interest, and I wanted to do it right away. And my sister didn't really like ballet. It wasn't for her. But I always had this passion. But I grew up in Vermont where there wasn't really a good ballet teacher, and so I got whatever training I got. And Vermont is not that far from New York City, so my parents would take me to New York City on the weekends. The family would go, and we'd go to the ballet or the symphony or whatever, and they would arrange for me to have a ballet class while I was there. And all the teachers said, your daughter is very talented, but she's not getting good training. And so my parents listened to that and worked very hard to arrange for me to get to New York to study at the School of American Ballet, which is affiliated with New York City Ballet.
You had to go through some exam?
Yes, I had to have an audition, and the first time I went, I only went for 3 months because I couldn't. I was 12 years old. There's no place to live in New York alone for a 12-year-old. My parents couldn't come, so it was very. My parents really were very instrumental in having courage and foresight to find ways to get me to New York at a very early age. It was very difficult for them, and I don't know where they found the bravery, the courage to.
Like Balanchine himself, he stayed in the dormitory, but you didn't.
There were no dormitories then. In those days, there were no dormitories at all. And so you had to figure out your own place to stay and who was going to take care of a 13-year-old girl. So at first, it was my grandparents that took care of me for about 3 months. And then I was still too young. This school wouldn't even take me for the summer course. I was too young. But then a year later, I went back, and then they gave me a Ford Foundation scholarship, which enabled me to be able to stay in New York, and we found living accommodations with other at first with other students and one mother, and then that didn't work out so well, and eventually my father changed jobs. He left his job
because of you,
because of me, and moved to New York. Yeah.
But they were really sacrificing.
They really sacrificed for me, and without that, I wouldn't have had a career.
I think they sacrificed because they realized you have a true talent at certain moment.
I think they saw two things. I think they saw my passion for it, that I loved it, and whenever they offered other things, interests for me, I liked them, but I always went back to ballet. If I had to sacrifice, it was always, ballet was my first choice, no matter what they presented to me. I love skiing and skating and horseback riding and all those things, but ballet was what I loved. And I think they saw that passion, and then they saw any teacher that had any knowledge at all that they had me take class with said, she's talented, she has talent, but she needs good training.
And only there in school you've heard this name Balanchine.
So at the school, Balanchine, and we used to get free tickets to the ballet if the house wasn't sold out. Mm-hmm. And so I would start to go to the ballet and see these ballets, and I fell in love with the ballets. And, of course, everyone revered Mr. Balanchine, and I did too. And my first full year at the school, I was asked to be a child and participate in Nutcracker.
That's what I want to ask, because Balanchine remembers himself how, as a child, they were brought to Mariinsky Theater and they participated.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you had the same chance.
I did, and I almost didn't make it. I was sitting, I happened to have a hip injury at the time, and I was sitting watching my class instead of taking class, and Balanchine walked in with Diana Adams, who was at the time the head of the school, and she asked me to stand up, so I stood up, and he just looked at me. He didn't say a word, and he kind of looked me up and down, and he turned to Diana and went, And they turned and they left. And I thought, uh-oh. Uh-oh, what's gone wrong? What's happening? What have I done? What's going to happen? And it turned out that he was trying, she asked him if I was too tall. I was still, at that point, I was still on the small side. I grew kind of late. And, but I was still taller than most of the children in Nutcracker. And so she wanted to make sure that he didn't think I was too tall. And he gave his approval. And so there I was in Nutcracker. And then I was the first person out in this line of children. And the day of the stage rehearsal, he took my hand and he walked me in this circle to show me where I had to go. I was in heaven. I thought, if I, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I thought, I've worked with Mr. Balanchine. He's held my hand. He's been very nice to me. It was wonderful.
And it was the very first production you did on stage.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah.
And your parents, they came later to see you in it?
They came to see me in it. Yes, they did. They cried. Of course, we still laugh about it, how they cried.
And
they just held hands and cried.
Mr. Balanchine version, which we know nowadays?
Yes,
the same
yes,
Nutcracker?
yes.
Do you like it? By the way?
I love it. I think to me, it's the best production of Nutcracker. But of course, I'm biased, I think.
Because, some people think that the music of Tchaikovsky is so tragic in Nutcracker, and this is like a fairy tale, and some people feel it like a dichotomy between this sorrow music and the kids' fairy tale, but I don't know.
I don't know. I like his, it's so much from the child's point of view, the fantasy of Christmas and the joy of Christmas and one's imagination, and I think it's just wonderful.
In production you did Mr. Balanchine, he was Drosselmeyer or not by that time?
No, by the time I was in it, he was not doing that anymore. No. I've seen the film of him, but no, he never did it.
But then when you were accepted in the company at 1967, it was exactly the year of Jewels. So when you come to the company, it was on its way to be created, or it
No,
already
it had been
premiere?
created. I joined in the fall of 1967, and it was premiered in the spring. But didn't participate in the creation of it, but I've been in it practically since
From
the
the
beginning. Practically from the beginning.
And there are so many versions of what Balanchine wanted to represent there, like, for example, French school, American and Russian school, or like Paris, New York, and St. Petersburg city he loved most.
Yes, yes.
Or maybe simply just the spirit of this jewels.
Well, I think so, and also I think he looked at his dancers as jewels. Precious, they were precious to him. And that we each had personality, and each had individual skills that he could highlight and present. So, I feel he did that in other ballets too. It was like we were something precious, and he would create this fantastic setting, like a piece, beautiful jewel, and you create gold and silver and whatever you create to make a beautiful piece of jewelry that highlights that particular jewel. And that's what he did.
And I think you were very lucky, first of all, to be with Mr. Balanchine, because this genius can be, once in a century, or rare than this. And he also created on you, which is, I guess, even more amazing.
It's more amazing. It was. I was daunted by it. I wanted to please him. I wanted it to be a good ballet. I just didn't want to disappoint him. So I was very nervous about it. But right away, as he started to work, it seemed. He challenged me for sure with the steps he gave me, but it just seemed like another day in the ballet studio. It wasn't anything, he was very calm and quiet and confident, and, well, dear, what do you like to do? What kind of turn do you like to do? And which leg would you like to lift? And,
you would discuss with him?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
So when he was coming, it was not that the whole thing was prepared and you was just repeating, he was really building it on you?
He built it on each individual dancer. He knew the music well. He was a musician. He actually, for Ballo della Regina, he created the piano score himself from the orchestral score, because there wasn't one. So clearly he knew the music, he understood the music, and he had studied the music very, very deeply, and had made decisions about when the corps de ballet would dance, when the principal dancers would come in, who had what solos, what music were for the soloist girls, what music were for the principal dancers, and that he had in his mind. And I think he had, when he told me he was doing the ballet, he said it's going to be a virtuoso ballet. So clearly he knew, he had an idea of, I don't know if he had an idea of what types of steps he wanted to use, but it was going to be bravura dancing.
And at the same time you had some freedom in the moment of creation.
Yes, yes. you know. And I said, well, when he asked me what kind of turns, dear, what kind of turns can you do? And I said, please, just not fouette turns. I said, I don't know, anything else is fine, I don't want to do fouette turns. So then he thought for about 2 seconds and came up with a turn that at a normal tempo would be fine. It wouldn't be that virtuosic, but then when I heard what tempo I had to do it at, I thought, oh, okay, that's hard.
But he was easy inventing steps. It was just like
it was like
coming
nothing.
out.
Just
It's like
just
natural.
yes, really astounding to see him be that inventive instantaneously. And there was another step that was, he had an idea. He must have had some kind of photographic memory, because he remembered images from life, whether it was things in a museum or things he saw on the street, or I don't know where he got all his ideas, but he had this one step. He said, you know, dear, nobody before could do. Now you will do. And it was impossible. It was impossible. No, I didn't do it. I mean, I sort of did, but then there used to be music boxes that had a ballerina on it. And as the music played, the ballerina would turn and her legs would kind of open. They were in second position. So as she would turn, they'd fly open and she'd be turning. And that's what he wanted me to do. Jump on point without bending my knees and turn quickly. And I could turn, but it didn't look like anything. And I don't know, I just thought I wasn't being very successful, but I worked on it and I worked on it and I worked on it, and finally one day I went to him and I said, you know, I just don't think I'm creating the effect that you want. I just, you know, would you consider changing it? Oh yes, dear, no problem. And he just thought for about 2 seconds, well, I'll do this. It just came out of him, you know.
So the process with him also was a pleasure, like
Very much a pleasure. What was hard, he worked so quickly that it was hard to remember it all that fast. And then it was often very challenging. And so you could remember it, but you know, you couldn't necessarily execute it well right then. So it was that part. That was what was hard, to keep up with him.
And we speak with you now, it's January 2014. Mr. Balanchine was born in January 1904.
Right.
So it's 110 years anniversary. When was his birthday? Was he celebrating it somehow?
Well, he's January 22nd.
Yes, was he celebrating it somehow? Was he bringing people home? Were you doing something for him? I don't know, cake?
Personally, I didn't. I think we all kind of recognized it, and, you know, quietly. He didn't like to think about birthdays, I don't think.
Because somehow I got the feeling that he liked very much people and good cuisine.
Oh, he did. And he was a wonderful cook. He loved to cook. And he would use cooking analogies when he taught class. Oh, you have to be like a champagne cork coming out of the bottle. Or, you know, it's very difficult to stand just straight, facing straight front. And it's to make it interesting is difficult. And it's like cooking a veal roast with only salt and pepper and no garlic, you know. It's hard to do and make it interesting. So he was full of analogies like that, and which were witty, and you know, so you know, it's stressful. Ballet is exhausting and stressful, and his standards were so high that it was a struggle to please him. But he would lighten the mood somehow, and with these little funny stories and analogies that stuck in our minds, and yet were very evocative of what the movement should be like, you know. So.
And when did you start to recognize that he's not just Mr. Balanchine, but that he's really a genius?
The minute he walked in a room, you knew he was different. There was some kind of, not that he wasn't pretentious or anything. He was a very quiet, polite gentleman, unassuming seeming, but he radiated confidence and authority and graciousness. I don't know, he just seemed in command, and the minute you went up, you saw him, you knew he was special. It's just unbelievable.
Did you get a chance to be with him in Russia when he came in 1972?
Well, I was on the tour.
Yes.
I was here. But I didn't socialize with him then.
You stayed in this horrible hotel which is not existing any longer.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. the Russia.
Russia, exactly,
Yeah.
Russia, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not a
You know,
joy to be there.
I guess our country changed in between.
It's changed a lot for the better.
This is good.
Yes,
And you were
yes.
performing in Kremlin Palace.
Yes,
This huge
yes,
stage.
yes, a huge
But you were
stage.
performing Jules.
I probably.
Yes.
Yes. I don't really remember.
Well, the company did. I mean,
Yes, I mean the
anyway.
company did.
And I've heard from people here who was at that time in Moscow that it was your tour at 1972, already before, but some people don't, whom I spoke with, they don't remember how it was before. But they said at 1972, you can't imagine what it was. The whole Moscow wanted to be there.
Be there.
And I was asking why it was Kremlin Palace, and what I understood maybe just for economical reason, because it's like so many places there, all the thousands.
So
And
many
it
more
was
people can fit in the
full
auditorium.
house.
Yeah. Yeah, but we were all upset that we weren't at the Bolshoi.
But I understood you were coming here for some classes, no? Or you don't remember?
I
how
came
it-
here to dance for a UNESCO gala in 1986. I did Tchaikovsky Pas here with Kevin McKenzie from American Ballet Theatre.
So you remember this house when
So
it
I
was
remember
old?
when it was old, you know.
Did you met some of the Bolshoi dancers at that
I
time?
did. Plasetskaya was here, and she and my husband were talking. My husband speaks some Russian, and so the two of them were
He's
talking.
polyglot, your husband.
Yes, yes.
I was
yes.
amazed also to read that you met him on the street.
Yes.
How could you do it?
It was very strange. It was because of ballet. He had become a ballet. He had never been to the ballet before 1972, and he was taken to the ballet, and he fell in love with it, and he started going to different companies, and then he fell in love with New York City Ballet. He said, "This is the company I want to see," and he started going 2 or 3 times a week. And I was in the Corps de Ballet when we met in 1974, and he recognized my profile, but he didn't know my name because it was too hard to figure out a Corps de Ballet name. But he knew the names of the principal dancers, and he loved the ballet. And he recognized me on the street, and he came up and he said, "You're a dancer with New York City Ballet, and I don't know your name, but I know you're with the company." And I was kind of like,
Of course.
on the street? They always tell you not to talk to anybody on the street
From
in
your
New York, you know. But he told me he was a simultaneous interpreter at the UN, and that kind of impressed me. And I liked his voice. And he said, "I'd love to talk to you. I'll take you out to dinner, but I won't make you eat a lot, because I know you have to watch. Dancers have to be careful, and I won't make you stay out late. I'm sure you work very hard. You need to get your sleep." And I'm like, this person is very thoughtful. So I took a chance, and it worked out.
And he speaks numbers of languages.
Yes, he speaks about 9 languages.
And he always was a support to you after that.
He was an incredible support to me. He would come basically to every performance I did, unless he was working or out of town. And he would sit. He didn't know ballet terms. He was just a general member of the audience, and he would say, "Well, that looked awkward, but that moment looked good, and could you turn a little more this way?" And he would make notes during the performance, and then we'd go out to dinner afterwards, and he'd say, "This was good, and that wasn't so good," and I'd say, "You don't know how hard that step was." And he said, "I don't know how hard it was, but it didn't look good."
Well, Balanchine was saying, and I think maybe I cannot buy it, because he was saying that in the end of your life, love is more important than art. And I don't know if it was like this in this case. Maybe art is for all the art people on the first place, but it's really important to have somebody who loves you apart from the art you're doing, to have this force back
It
home.
is, but it's also nice if they understand your devotion to your art and also enjoy your art. You know, he
Yeah.
loved coming to the ballet. He loved being able to see all that. It was gratifying for him too, and gratifying to see me improve. And we would talk about things that a lot of other people didn't correct me on. Balanchine didn't talk about what to do with my face, and I, in the early days, kind of had a frozen smile, and because I thought, I have to look like I'm enjoying myself, and nobody would talk about it, and my husband did, and that was very helpful, and it was right around the time that I met him that my career started to take off. So I think he contributed a great deal to it.
When you're looking now back on your education in American Ballet Theatre, do you think it was properly done, or you missed some classes, or you would like to have something else to learn when you were a child?
I think we didn't have any pantomime classes. We didn't have any dance history classes. And we didn't have any music. I mean, I had studied the piano, so I had music. So, but some people hadn't had music.
Really?
And I think now the school has music classes, and they have character class, which we didn't have either, and they have a ballroom class, which we didn't have either. So they've moved in the direction of trying to cover some of those other areas that are related to what we have to do. It's not just all technique, you know. There are other aspects to it. So I think that's good. That's a good thing.
I think it's good, and I think as much as Balanchine was devoted to the music, as much as his inspiration was coming from the music, it's strange for me to think that in the ballet study somebody wouldn't have it.
I think there wasn't in the early days, there wasn't a place to do it in the school. You know, and who was going to pay for it? We didn't, you know, everybody was getting by, barely getting by financially, the company and the school.
He is so spoiled, because from the 19th century, the school, which has its dormitory also, it has its dormitory because it could invite people from all around the country. You just had to need to have talent, and then you can work in there. And it always was supported by states.
Right.
And in Soviet time as well.
Right.
And in the United States, it's a mystery to me how it all works.
It's not like that. You have to raise money for it every year and get people to donate the funds. And then you have to have a place in the building to have a music class. You know, but ballet classes were going on all the time, and there was no space for a music room or anything. It was very, very bare essentials in terms of studio space. And you know, there were 2 studios in the old school where when I went, there were 2 main ballet studios and 1 little tiny one, and that's it. That's it.
It's also like this famous class they had in St. Petersburg, Vaganova School, where also all the dancers already from the theater were trained in Vaganova School itself. Right. Only later something was built in Mariinsky.
Yeah. So I don't think it's for lack of wanting to do it. I think it was impractical to offer that, because the fact that they're doing it now shows that they knew that it had some importance.
But I think to work with Mr. Balanchine, you still have to have some musicality. It's just not possible unless you don't, even if you count carefully. It's just...
Well, I think some people were more musical than others, have had more natural affinity for it. But I think with dancers, music is... Wanting to move to music is sort of the source of our inspiration. So... More than likely,
you were lucky, because with Balanchine you always had quite a good scores, right?
Yeah.
Your music
I mean, the music he chose was beautiful, wonderful. But there was some modern music that I never would have appreciated if it weren't for the music for Agon, the Stravinsky score. I never would have. Now I love it, but I never would have appreciated that. And some of Webern and some other things that are, not so easy to just sit down and listen to.
Right.
But now that I've seen the ballet, I mean, it brings up his phrase of see the music, hear the dance. Now I hear that music and I see his ballets, and I see the music in another way. So I hear it in another way.
And you had a very long career. I understood, like one of the longest in the United States, like 31 years.
Yeah,
I don't know if you still miss some parts which you wanted to dance and you haven't danced.
Oh, yes.
Yes?
Oh, yes.
Even after all this?
Even after, I was very fortunate. I really had a wonderful repertoire, and I can't say that there are, it's not a long list, but there are ballets that I always wanted to do and I never did. So, but the nicest thing about my career was that I didn't have to do bad ballets. There weren't lots of new choreographers coming in doing ballets that, spending all that time. Anytime I was working, it was...
Apart from working with the biggest genius.
I mean, I had 2.
Yes,
Balanchine and Jerry Robbins.
Exactly.
I mean, that's an incredible experience. So my career spanned a most incredible
but also
time.
What I found really amazing, I mean, taking in consideration where you was born, like in Vermont later on, and then moved to New York, find your way to this profession. You build up all your career. You worked for 31 years on stage, and then you moved to the coach, to the teacher. It was also quite in a smoothly way, no? or it was for you some drama, or you just move it easily, naturally, in a sense?
Well, I wouldn't say it was easy. First of all, physically, I was in a lot of discomfort. My hips were not good, and I felt like I couldn't show steps. You know, I think I always imagined that when I stopped, I would, you know, start teaching and I would still be able to do things. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. So that made it harder, I think. And it's just very different. You don't realize, some days I would walk out of the studio and I think I need to be trained as a psychologist, because to manage people's emotions and their insecurities, and you know, but people are different and you can't treat them all the same. And I'd spent my life focusing on me, not about how to encourage this person or that person, and I was just, tell me what to do and I will work to do it. That was my approach, and it's not a lot of people's approach. And I find that it always seems odd to me, and I think I could be a little too tough on people, you know. And so I had to learn another. I had
And also
to
to
learn
find right
another way.
words, how to
The
explain
right
it to
words,
them.
and notice, you know, I could help the girls easily, but the men was, I never knew what they were doing back there. How are they posing? I don't know. I could feel what they, you know, how they would lift me or how the hand took my hand, but I didn't know some of those other things, and I hadn't really paid attention to it, and suddenly I had to pay attention to it.
And when Mr. Balanchine was ill, was in the hospital, you were aware the way the things are going?
We knew he was ill, and we knew he didn't seem to be getting better. He seemed to be getting worse, and that was it was very hard, because he had always been in the theater. First thing in the morning till last thing at night. He would teach class, and then he'd take rehearsals all day long, and then he would stand in the front wing during performance, so you saw him there, and he'd
He was
sit
watching from the wings?
from the wings. He usually,
Like Petit Balls.
yeah, and he would sit backstage and talk to the dancers, or talk to the musician, talk to the stage manager, or talk to the conductor, or, you know, whoever he needed to talk to, he would talk to. And then he'd go around the theater at the end of the night turning out lights to save money.
Himself?
Himself, yes.
So really, every day?
Every day, all day long. So to suddenly have him not be there at any time was just, we all kind of felt like we were, you know, at sea without any oars. We were floating and we were going forward, and, you know, and we were trying to maintain whatever he had taught us, you know, to do, and to behave the way he had taught us, and dance the ballets the way he taught us. But
at the same time, I was amazed when I
was
spoke to
hard.
Barbara, because I said to her, like, after his passing away, how you started to build up the foundation, to preserve it, to work on it. And she said to me, everything was moving in a natural way. Like, he passed away, but life was just sort of going from day to day, on and on and on.
Well, in a way it was, you know. All of us who had worked with him regularly maintained that, and we tried to set the example for the younger dancers.
That's, I think, great from his side, that he trained so many people around him, that even without him being here for such a long time, because still now, when I look what you did with Bolshoi, it's a miracle to me, indeed, and I just see his art moving through you, all of you, forward. For such a
Well, I
long
hope that's
time
true.
period.
We really, I mean, that's our urge, our desire, our goal is to try and pass on what he taught us, and to make the ballets look as close to what he imagined and created as possible, and also to make the dancers love the ballets. And I think they do. I think they really enjoy dancing them, want to dance them more, and they seem eager, even though sometimes what we're asking is really difficult for them. They seem eager to acquire those skills and do it the way we're asking. It's very gratifying to see that, and to see them change, and see them become, you know, Jules looks like Jules. And sometimes ballets don't look like, you know, it just looks like something different. And I feel that Jules is, you know, I mean, there's some things that aren't exactly stylistically you know, exactly the way they would be if he had trained them, but I think the essence of the ballets is there, and that's the most important thing. The essence of it, the mood of it.
I would say also the beauty, sometimes really outstanding
and
beauty, breathtaking.
And the patterns, you know, everyone is so good about keeping lines and formations and spacing, and so that all the patterns show. And so that's really, you know, it's
And also when you have good bodies.
And a beautiful big stage.
Yes.
You know, of the bodies. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
This is
You walk in the room and you think, every person's body just looks gorgeous. How is this possible? You know, it's really true. They look beautiful.
But one other thing I recognize that whenever you're staging, maybe it's a wrong perspective, but I remember in Mariinsky long ago, and he in Bolshoi, and maybe in other companies, whenever you do Balanchine pieces, you also try to have some classes, like to give at the same time Balanchine class.
That often happens. I would say, for us, we've been overwhelmed with the amount of rehearsal we have to do, and I mean, already we're working without a break 8, 9, 10 hours, and to add class on top of that, no.
Sometimes.
No,
too
it's
tough.
just too much. It's too much.
I have some silly question. I read you were saying that the season a long time ago, maybe now as well, I don't know, but long time ago, was just 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So what was in the rest? What was the rest of
Then we'd have
9 months?
Well, we would, let me think. We'd have a rehearsal period, maybe 6 weeks, then 3 months of performances, then a break, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks off, and then we'd start again. We'd have 5 or 6 weeks of rehearsal and a 2-month season, a week off, and then we'd go. We had a summer home in Saratoga Springs, New York, upstate New York. We'd go there. Initially, we went there for a month in July, and then we'd have a big break. August, September, usually we had nothing. And then it would start all over again.
And how Mr. Balanchine was building a season? Was he trying to show, I don't know, many titles, many new work, or he had some special idea of each season?
No, I think most of the time it was mixed repertoire, except for Nutcracker. You know, we do 5 weeks of Nutcracker. But the other programs were mixed bill programs. But he'd, you know, the special things were new ballets. He'd do a new ballet or 2 new ballets or 3 new ballets every season. And it wasn't built around, you know, that was what was the new interesting thing. And the rest of the time was the established repertoire, new casts frequently, you know, sometimes because there were injuries, sometimes because somebody new came in the company that he was interested in and he wanted to give them something. And so it was, let's go see this cast. And, you know, a ballet would go 7, 8 times, and you could see 2 or 3 casts do it, and really, and the dancers really got a chance to, from doing it more frequently, to feel more comfortable in it, make it their own, as opposed to doing one performance and then, you know, 6 months later do one more performance of that ballet. It gave us a chance to really develop. And
I thought you also were traveling maybe around the United States.
We didn't tour very much. We didn't tour very much. Sometimes, I mean, there was a certain period when we did a summer tour of 2 or 3 cities, but we really toured very little. We were really in New York most of the time, in a wonderful, I mean, it was then called the New York State Theater, which was really built for dance. It's a fantastic place to work. It was, you know, except it had no windows.
Really? Backstage?
Backstage there are no windows.
Darkness.
So you feel kind of isolated, but in terms of the floor and the, you know, the backstage space and the size of the stage and, you know, what it looked like outside, it was, you know, lighting wise it was good. It didn't make us fall over from being too dark, or, you know, it was.
Is it your favorite stage?
Yes. Yes, of course I dance there more than anywhere else,
It's your
but
home place, but
it's
still.
my home. But still, I've never been on a stage that I felt more comfortable on.
This one.
You know, I mean, I've been in beautiful theaters, but like here at the Bolshoi, the Rake, that doesn't make me comfortable. The tilted stage is difficult.
Yes.
So
It's
even if it's
hard.
beautiful, I'm struggling. I was struggling. So the State Theater was my favorite place.
When you now come to the performances as a spectator, do you feel that spectators changed, or you don't feel it?
Well, it's hard for me to know here.
I mean, at the stage.
In the States, Yes, it's changed. It's changed. I think there's a group of older people who are really devoted to the ballet and really have knowledge, know what they're seeing, and really, are discerning. And then there's a much younger group that it's more for a little more social activity, and oh, let's go, and they don't want to see anything a second time. They want variety all the time, and I think that's it's interesting to see somebody else do a ballet, the same ballet. Looks different,
Of course.
And I think people's attention spans. I think all the computers and digital things in some ways have made people want more variety, and they have a shorter attention span in some funny way.
Exactly. I think the attention breaks now. You
Yes,
cannot stay as
for a long
as
time.
before.
And also things are available. I mean, you can watch ballet on YouTube all the time. So
And at the same time, I hope sometimes that something unknown would be revealed about Mr. Balanchine, like recordings of his rehearsal or something. But I don't know if you have any inside.
I don't have any. I don't.
Camera or something like this. Somebody
No.
who could
I mean, there
one
were
day come up
every
with
now and
something.
then there was someone who had made a home movie or something, and
Right.
something's revealed, but it's never for very long, and it's always without music and silent, and it's always fun to see it, but I don't think there's going to be any grand. I mean,
I'm interested
who
now
knows? I don't
what
know.
they filmed here in Russia when he was here. Maybe there is something. Maybe we can
I think
find
there
something
was.
in the
I mean, I
archives.
think they filmed some of him teaching class when we were here in 1972. I think there's a
I
little
think
bit.
I'll have to go to the archives.
You better go to the
But
archives and find it.
And my final question is, you wrote a book, but quite a long time ago.
Yes.
You don't consider second part of it?
No. No. I found, I'm glad I wrote the book, but I found it first of all, I never planned to write it myself. That was not the original plan. And I ended up writing it, but I didn't enjoy the process of writing it. It was really difficult. And I don't have the motivation to do that again. And I'd have to think hard about what topic to, how to present it. I didn't keep notes over the years. I just, I have reactions, but I don't know. I just don't quite know what to do. And because the process of writing is so difficult, I don't feel like even starting.
I see.
You know,
And also,
just-
I also read you were running for maybe 1 or 2 years a company, mostly touring company, I understood. But you never wanted to run a company. That's
No,
the
I
question.
don't. I don't want to be a director.
No.
I don't. I really, I feel I can I have an artistic sense and could help dancers and, maybe, but there's so many aspects to being an artistic director that I feel I would not be good at. And I also feel, as a dancer, I gave 100%. It was a 24-hour-a-day job. And dancing for so long it really was hard. And I just don't feel like giving 24 hours a day of my life to something that I don't feel I have aptitude for.
And also some administrative questions.
All this administrative work that it's become much more administrative. It's not just an artistic job. It's more administrative than artistic these days. And
That's true.
and raising money in the States, you are basically raising money all the time. That's your primary job.
This is not an interesting.
It's not. It's
sound-
not the job I want. I would much rather be coaching the ballets and helping in that regard. That's what I feel I do well. Pass on the artistic aspect of things and a technical aspect of how to do the steps and what's required for dancers that aren't familiar with that kind of technique. Because the speed that Balanchine had us dance at is faster than most dancers in other parts of the world are familiar with. And his ballets make you are forced to move fast. You have to. And if you can, once you give them guidance about things to think about, the way to move your arm closer to your body instead of way out here, it helps. But if nobody tells them that, they're going to struggle. So that's where I feel my gift is and my interest is, and I feel I should do what I'm good at, what I'm not good at.
I was also wondering if you worked with Danilova once upon
I
a time.
did. She was, first of all, she was one of my teachers, and at one point, Balanchine wanted me to learn from Danilova, all the Petipa Sleeping Beauty, maybe all the Petipa solos that she knew, but certainly the ones from Sleeping Beauty, and record them. And then I was injured and out for a year, and then she started to decline, and it never happened. Never happened. It's
So
really
we
too
don't
bad.
have this?
No, no, we don't. But she was a very distinctive personality. She really, and she always, up until the very end,
Graceful.
the perfume
Yes.
and dressed in a chiffon skirt and those beautiful, her legs were so beautiful. Even at the end, she was always showing them off, and she's, girls, you have to present yourself even in life. You can't walk around like this, sloppy, and you're a ballerina, you're a ballet dancer, you're something special. So
Look after you.
Look
Like,
after
present
yourself. Present yourself. And she always did. She would come to the ballet, come to every gala, and she was, dressed beautifully, and it was a great example. She was wonderful.
What I understood that Balanchine also liked good clothes and liked to give presents to his dancers,
Yes.
to give them perfumes. He even
Yes.
wrote that I
Yeah.
like to give perfumes to my ballerinas, and then when they come, because I have a very good nose,
Nose.
I know who is where.
They sent in the elevator. Oh, so and so was just here. She's in the theater. I'll see her soon. Yeah, he liked to do that. And I know early on when we would go on tour, he would say, you have to dress, when you get off the plane, people will be taking photographs. You have to look distinguished,
Right.
not just kind of, sleepy and with your hair all, or in jeans and sloppy. He didn't want us to be sloppy. He wanted us to look.
That's how.
And he felt we were special people, He would say, you're not just elite dancers, you're elite people. And not elite is maybe not the right word, but you're special. You're special. And you have to behave that way. You have to look that way because you are special.
Well, Merrill Ashley, I think you're very special, and I think one of the best things in the ballet is that this art goes from one human being to another human being in a very direct way. And I think that Bolshoi dancers and Bolshoi company is very lucky to have you here with us and to teach us and to pass us the word and the art of Mr. Balanchine. And so thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.